The heavy oak door of the Manhattan penthouse slammed shut behind Dominic with a finality that echoed through the marble foyer like a gunshot. In that single moment, the man who had once been Victor Harrington's golden heir became nothing more than a ghost in his father's empire, cut off for the unforgivable crime of loving another man. Dominic stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk at midnight, suitcase in one hand and the shredded remains of his trust fund statements in the other. The city lights blurring through tears he refused to let fall. 22 years old, freshly graduated from Columbia, and suddenly homeless in the only world he had ever known. Victor had waited until the birthday dinner guests left to deliver the blow. "I didn't raise a son to parade around with some boy," he had snarled, his voice cutting sharper than any boardroom negotiation. "Pack your things. You're no longer part of this family. No discussion. No second chance." Just the cold click of the lock and the distant sound of his mother crying behind closed doors. Dominic had always known his father prized legacy above all else, but he never imagined love could be the line that ended everything. He walked for hours through the empty streets of Midtown, the summer rain soaking through his designer shirt. By dawn he had sold the Rolex his father gave him for graduation and bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco. The West Coast felt like the only place far enough to breathe. On the plane he stared out the window, replaying every childhood memory of Victor teaching him to sail, praising his straight-A report cards, promising the company would one day be his. All of it erased because Dominic had finally said the words out loud. "Dad, I'm gay." San Francisco greeted him with fog and possibility. He found a tiny studio in the Mission District, shared with 3 other broke 20-somethings who didn't ask questions. Days blurred into job applications at coffee shops and tech support desks, each rejection another reminder of the world he had lost. Nights were worse, filled with the hollow ache of wondering if he had made the right choice. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening while waiting for the bus, he met Caleb. Caleb was sketching on a damp bench outside a small art gallery, his dark curls falling over wire-rimmed glasses as he captured the city lights in quick charcoal strokes. When their eyes met, something in Dominic's chest shifted for the first time since that slammed door. "You look like you could use a friend," Caleb said simply, offering half of his umbrella. They talked until the rain stopped, about art and dreams and the courage it took to walk away from everything. By the time they parted, Dominic had Caleb's number and the first fragile thread of hope since his father had disowned him. That small connection became everything. Caleb worked as a freelance graphic designer, scraping by but never complaining. He listened without judgment when Dominic confessed the full story of the penthouse and the empire he would never inherit. "You're not defined by what he took away," Caleb told him one night over cheap Thai food. "You're defined by what you build next." Those words planted the seed. Dominic began staying up late, sketching business plans on napkins, ideas for an app that connected young LGBTQ entrepreneurs with mentors who understood real struggle. It was small, maybe foolish, but it was his. Weeks turned into months. Dominic landed a barista job at a Castro cafe where the tips were decent and the customers kind. He and Caleb fell into an easy rhythm of shared dinners and late-night walks along the Embarcadero. For the first time Dominic felt seen, not as Victor Harrington's son but as himself. Yet the wound remained raw. Every time his phone rang with an unknown number, his heart lurched, half hoping, half dreading it was his father. It never was. One evening, after a particularly brutal shift, Dominic sat on the fire escape with Caleb, city lights twinkling below. "I keep wondering if he'll ever regret it," he admitted quietly. Caleb squeezed his hand. "The question is whether you'll let his regret define your future." Dominic didn't have an answer yet, but holding Caleb's hand under the stars, he realized he was ready to find out. The journey had only just begun, and for the first time since that slammed door, Dominic felt ready to walk forward instead of looking back. The first year in San Francisco tested every limit Dominic thought he possessed. Mornings started before sunrise with coffee orders and laptop coding sessions squeezed between shifts. Evenings ended with Caleb reviewing pitch decks, red pen in hand, offering gentle criticism that somehow never stung. Their tiny apartment became a laboratory of dreams, walls covered in sticky notes and whiteboards filled with user flows for the app Dominic had named Forge. The concept was simple yet revolutionary, a platform where young queer professionals could find mentors, funding, and community without fear of judgment. Money remained tight. Dominic's savings from selling his watch dwindled fast, and Caleb's freelance gigs paid just enough for rent and groceries. They learned to stretch every dollar, celebrating small victories like landing their first paying client for Caleb's design work or Dominic's app prototype passing beta testing with flying colors. Prejudice surfaced in unexpected places. A potential investor at a networking event sneered when Dominic mentioned the LGBTQ focus. Stick to something neutral, kid. No one wants politics in their portfolio. Dominic walked away with clenched fists, but Caleb was waiting outside with 2 tacos and a reminder. Their loss is our fuel. Family silence weighed heavier than any rejection letter. Dominic's mother sent occasional secret texts filled with worry and pleas to just apologize to your father. He never replied. Victor's empire continued expanding in the headlines. New acquisitions announced with the same ruthless precision that had once built Dominic's future. Each article felt like another door slamming shut. Nights brought nightmares of standing alone in the penthouse while his father turned away forever. Caleb held him through those nights, never pushing, simply being the steady presence Dominic had never known he needed. Their relationship deepened quietly, built on shared vulnerability rather than grand gestures. Caleb shared his own story of being kicked out at 17, surviving on couches until he clawed his way into design school. I used to think love was a luxury I couldn't afford, he confessed one rainy Sunday. Then you showed up with your suitcase and your stubborn heart. Dominic realized then that Caleb wasn't just a partner. He was the mirror that reflected back the man Dominic was becoming. Stronger, kinder, unafraid. The breakthrough arrived in the most ordinary way. A local accelerator program for social impact startups accepted Forge after Dominic's 10th application attempt. The acceptance email arrived while he was wiping down espresso machines at the cafe. He read it 3 times before the words sank in. When he called Caleb, his voice cracked with disbelief. They want us in the cohort. Full funding for 6 months. Caleb's whoop echoed through the phone. That night they splurged on takeout and danced in the tiny kitchen to old jazz records, the future suddenly feeling possible. Yet success brought new pressures. Mentors warned Dominic that scaling meant tough choices, and the app's queer focus might alienate mainstream investors. He worked 18-hour days, refining code until his eyes burned. Caleb took on extra projects to cover bills during the lean months. Their first real fight happened when Dominic missed Caleb's gallery opening because of a deadline. I can't keep being the only one showing up for us, Caleb said quietly, hurt flickering in his eyes. Dominic apologized profusely, realizing the balance between ambition and love required constant vigilance. They made a pact that night. No dream was worth losing each other. By the end of the accelerator, Forge had secured its first round of seed funding from an unexpected source, a queer-led venture firm that believed in Dominic's vision. The check wasn't massive, but it was enough to quit the cafe job and move into a slightly larger apartment with actual windows. Dominic stood on the new balcony one evening, city lights stretching endlessly, and felt the first real stirrings of pride. He had built something from nothing. His father's money hadn't been required after all. Yet deep down, a quiet voice still whispered, would Victor ever know? Would he even care? Forge grew faster than Dominic had dared to dream. Within 18 months, the app had 10,000 active users, mentorship matches happening daily, and media outlets calling it the future of inclusive entrepreneurship. Dominic hired his first 3 employees, rented a small office in Soma, and learned to navigate board meetings where his youth and identity sometimes drew skeptical glances. Caleb designed the sleek new branding, his artwork featured in every user interface. Their partnership extended beyond romance into creative collaboration, each success sweeter because it belonged to both of them. Societal pushback arrived in waves. Conservative blogs questioned whether a niche app deserved mainstream attention. At industry conferences, Dominic fielded awkward questions about his personal life that male colleagues never faced. One investor pulled funding after learning about Caleb during a dinner meeting, muttering about lifestyle choices. Dominic refused to compromise. "This platform exists because people like me were told we didn't belong," he told the remaining backers. "If that's too political for you, there's the door." The room went silent, but Forge's user growth proved the market agreed with him. Friendships formed in unexpected places. Sarah, a sharp-witted marketing director who became Forge's first head of growth, bonded with Dominic over shared stories of family estrangement. "My parents still send me conversion therapy pamphlets every Christmas," she confided. Together they built a support network within the company, turning Forge into more than software, a community. Caleb organized monthly creative workshops, teaching users how to visualize their dreams through art. Watching Caleb light up in those sessions reminded Dominic why the struggle was worth it. Yet internal storms raged. Late nights brought crushing doubt. Dominic would stare at his reflection and see the boy his father had thrown away. Imposter syndrome whispered that success was temporary, that one wrong move would send him back to the rain-soaked sidewalk. Caleb recognized the signs and planned quiet getaways to Big Sur, where they hiked trails and talked until the weight lifted. "You're not your father's mistake," Caleb said during one sunset. "You're the man who chose to become more." Those words became Dominic's armor. News of Victor's latest merger hit the headlines around the same time Forge hit 50,000 users. Dominic read the article in his office, coffee growing cold. His father's face stared back from the screen, older now, lines deeper, but the same unyielding expression. A small part of Dominic still hoped for reconciliation. He drafted an email he never sent. Instead, he focused on the present, on Caleb's hand in his during company celebrations, on the team that believed in him without reservation. A pivotal moment came during a major pitch to a Silicon Valley legend. The investor leaned forward after Dominic's presentation. "Your story is compelling, kid. Disowned heir builds empire. But can you separate emotion from business?" Dominic met his gaze steadily. "The emotion is the business. That's what makes Forge different." The deal closed that afternoon. Walking out of the glass tower with Caleb waiting in the lobby, Dominic felt something shift inside him. He wasn't running from his past anymore. He was building beyond it. The acquisition offer arrived on a Tuesday that started like any other. A major social platform wanted to buy Forge for 9 figures, citing its engaged user base and innovative community features. Dominic sat in the conference room staring at the term sheet, heart hammering. This was the kind of exit that changed lives forever. Caleb stood beside him, fingers brushing his in silent support. "Whatever you decide, we face it together," he whispered. Negotiations stretched for weeks. Dominic insisted on clauses protecting the app's mission and ensuring current users kept their safe space. The board pushed back, but he held firm. Late nights brought flashbacks to the penthouse door slamming. Yet now the memory fueled resolve rather than fear. Caleb was his anchor, reminding him daily that money wasn't the goal, impact was. Their relationship faced its own test when paparazzi snapped photos of them at a charity gala, headlines speculating about the gay tech heir's comeback. Dominic braced for backlash, but the community rallied, user signups spiking overnight. Victor must have seen the coverage. Dominic's mother called one afternoon, voice trembling. "Your father saw the article. He hasn't said much, but I can tell it's eating at him." Dominic listened in silence, then gently ended the call. He wasn't ready for that conversation. Success tasted bittersweet knowing the man who had rejected him now watched from afar. The deal closed in a blaze of press releases. Dominic became an overnight multimillionaire, but more importantly, Forge's mission expanded under the new ownership with guaranteed independence. He and Caleb bought a modest house in No Valley with a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues with friends. Life settled into a new rhythm of board meetings and quiet evenings cooking together. Yet Dominic couldn't shake the growing sense that his father's silence carried weight. Internal conflict peaked during a trip to New York for investor meetings. Walking past the old family building, Dominic felt the old ache return. Caleb noticed immediately. "You don't owe him anything," he said softly over dinner that night. "But if you need closure, I'll stand beside you." Dominic chose not to knock on the penthouse door. Instead, he returned to San Francisco stronger, realizing forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was a choice he wasn't ready to make. Forge's success snowballed into something larger than Dominic had imagined. The platform launched international versions, partnered with universities, and inspired copycat apps worldwide. Dominic spoke at conferences, sharing his story of rejection fueling purpose. Each standing ovation felt like quiet defiance against the man who had once declared him worthless. Caleb remained his constant, designing campaigns that went viral and celebrating every milestone with homemade dinners and long talks on their porch. Victor's empire began showing cracks. Market shifts and bad acquisitions made headlines. Dominic received anonymous tips that his father was asking about him in private meetings. One evening a package arrived, no return address, containing a single photo from Dominic's childhood sailing trip with Victor. The note read simply, "Proud." Dominic stared at it for hours, emotions warring inside. Caleb held him as he cried for the first time in years. "He sees you now," Caleb said gently. "But you don't need his pride to know your worth." Company pressures mounted with rapid growth. A trusted executive leaked sensitive user data, forcing Dominic into damage control that tested every leadership lesson he had learned. Betrayal stung, echoing his father's rejection in painful ways. He chose transparency with users, offered free counseling resources, and emerged with stronger trust. Through it all, Caleb's quiet strength reminded him that real power came from integrity, not inheritance. Dominic's mother reached out again, this time openly. Victor was ill, nothing life-threatening yet, but the years had caught up. "He talks about you constantly now," she said. "The success stories in the news. They haunt him." Dominic listened but made no promises. The boy who once craved approval had grown into a man who valued peace over reconciliation on someone else's terms. The night the industry named Dominic Entrepreneur of the Year, the ballroom glittered with success. He stood on stage accepting the award, Caleb watching from the front row with tears in his eyes. In his speech, Dominic spoke of building family where blood had failed, of turning pain into purpose. The applause thundered, but his thoughts drifted briefly to the penthouse thousands of miles away. Victor watched the live stream alone in his study, the same room where he had delivered his ultimatum years earlier. Reports said the old man sat motionless for hours afterward, regret etched into every line of his face. He never reached out directly. Some wounds ran too deep for easy words. Dominic learned later through mutual contacts that his father had begun quietly donating to LGBTQ causes, a silent acknowledgement of the son he had lost. Life with Caleb continued in quiet joy. They traveled, supported young founders, and built a home filled with laughter and chosen family. Dominic had become the man his father could never see, compassionate yet unyielding, successful yet grounded. The empire he created wasn't built on money or legacy, but on the courage to love openly and live authentically. Years later, standing on their porch watching the sunset over San Francisco, Dominic turned to Caleb. "I used to think success would make the pain disappear." Caleb smiled, pulling him close. "It didn't disappear. It transformed." In that moment, Dominic understood the deepest truth of his journey. True or false? A parent's rejection of their gay son can ever be fully forgiven once success has proven them wrong?